This video will walk you through the remaining three requirements, starting with calculating the unit cost using the weighted average method for the month of May. So, to be consistent with what we did in class, I've got the three steps here remaining in process costing outlined. And we'll just start filling this in, and hopefully you'll see where some of the costs come from and the logic as to why as we work through it. So what we do have here are two separate cost categories. Some costs came in from beginning work in process, and some costs came from what we added in the current month. And the costs beginning that were sitting in the beginning work in process are summarized right here. So we have $1,500 for materials, and we had, if you can see that, $525 in conversion costs. So the total production costs that were sitting in work in process were $2,025, and we added during the period $18,900 in materials and $45.75 in conversion costs. $45.75. So the total production costs added in the month are those two numbers added together. And so my total cost that I need to account for is what I started with plus what I added. It's what I started with plus what I added. It's what I started with plus what I added for materials, conversion, and then total. So now to figure out how much is the cost for 1 ounce of beer that we're brewing, we take the costs incurred to date, which are simply an extension of what we just calculated, $25,500. It's this $20,400 and the $5,100. Okay, so those are the costs that we've incurred. And what's unique about the weighted average method is we don't recognize or distinguish from costs that might have been lower or higher in the prior accounting period that were brought in, right? So maybe some of this includes some barley or hops that's at a much higher price than what we bought at in the current month. And the weighted average method says I don't care. We're going to take all those costs, throw them together, and come up with one average. So that's why we're pulling all of that down, and we divide that by the equivalent units of work done. So we just calculated the equivalent units for materials up here, so I'll pull this number down. And the equivalent units for the conversion costs comes from right here, this 102. So the cost per unit is simply the costs incurred to date, which is a conglomeration of prior month and current month numbers, divided by the equivalent units. So 17 cents for material and 5 cents for conversion costs. So we know the total cost for 1 ounce, if I format that correctly, it's 22 cents. Great. So that's important information. It helps us monitor and track how well we're doing from one month to the next, whether our conversion costs are in line or our material costs are going up and down. That's one value of having that number. The other use of these numbers is to calculate the amount of work in process that makes its way through our manufacturing plant and subsequently our accounting records and into finished goods and into cost of goods sold. So we know we transferred out 90,000 units relative to the material. So we'd take that 90,000 and we'd multiply it by the unit cost for materials, 15,300. So what happens is work in process at that point gets reduced by 15,300 for this production process, and then it would get moved to the next area. That could be finished goods, it could be another process. And we do the same thing for the conversion costs. You take the amount completed and transferred out, 90,000 times the per unit equivalent cost, if that makes any sense, 4,500. And we still have some sitting in work in process. There are 30,000 times the 17 cents, and there's an equivalent 12,000 of conversion cost times the 5 cents. So this would be my work in process would be 5,100 plus 600. Amount moved out of work in process would be this 19,800. So we need to make sure we've accounted for all the costs. 25.5, look at that. Costs incurred are the cost accounted for. And so we can just make sure that the right categories were accounted for. The materials matches and the conversion costs match. So there we go. We've reconciled the costs. We've figured out the cost per unit and assigned the costs.